And welcome back to another podcast episode. With me, I have Coach Toby here. And today we are going to be going over the topic of how to make running not suck. So this is going to be basically a beginner's guide to running. And one of the reasons why we're recording this is because I am personally going into my own journey of running. And I'm going to be talking more of like a novice side of things, where Toby is more of an expert. Can you give people a brief overview of like your background in running?
Yeah, I've always been, well, not to toot my own horn, but like rather talented when it comes to running.
That's tooting.
I think the most impressive feat that I've done was I ran a full marathon, and at the 3-quarter mark, I changed into football gear because we had a game right after. My dad was waiting for me on the finish line, and I finished the full marathon. It was a charity event. He drove me to the game, and I was basically there just in time for coin toss, and I played the whole game.
Holy shit! What? I didn't know that.
I know, in high school. Yeah, it was silly. I had like terrible cramps the night of, but um, right from there, college track, all those kind of things, licensing through exos, working on some speed, some running gait, those kind of things, right?
So you've got a lot of personal experience, but also a lot of education in running, where I have had barely any, except for what I'm learning currently right now in my journey. And what I learned in like college as a softball player, where we didn't really learn much about running, and anything to do with running is more about sprinting, not necessarily long distance. And I've recently set this goal of running. My first race is in April. It's going to be a 10K. And then my second race of this year is going to be October. It's going to be a half marathon. And so I'm going from this realm of purely strength training, right, in some sports, to running long distance. And I'm coming from a place of like learning, where Toby's going to be talking from a place of being the expert. And so what I was talking about earlier with Toby, and I was like, oh my God, this would be a really great podcast, is that I tried running in the past and I just hated it. I absolutely hated running. And I was like, I'm never going to be a runner. And I'm just going through this whole place of like trying to work on my self-limiting beliefs and becoming the runner. But a huge friction to becoming a runner and going after these types of goals was it just sucked to me. I hated it. It was horrible every single time I went after it. But over a period of time, especially talking to Toby, and then Rachel, your wife, has a lot of experience in running too. She's a very good runner too.
Yes.
You guys have started helping me figure out ways to make it not suck. I was making a lot of mistakes that made it so much harder than it needed to be. And as soon as I started making these little changes over a period of time, it became so much easier. Like, don't get me wrong, running's very challenging, but now it's become enjoyable. And over a period of time, now I've developed more and more confidence over it, to the point where I'm like, yeah, like a half marathon will be very challenging, but I believe I can. And a lot of it is just because of really basic things that, again, Toby helped me with. There are some things where he was just like, why in the hell are you doing that? Like,
Oh yeah, I remember it was like a reel that you posted, and it was like you being like on a treadmill or something, and I just commented, and I was like, what are you doing?
Yep, I made a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. So we're just going to go over some of the things that you could potentially do if you are trying to get into running, or you're already running and you're looking for ways to make it suck less, essentially seeing if there's little things that you can add into your routine and make it a lot more enjoyable and safer as well. Okay, so with that being said, Toby is going to be talking about like some basic things. I'll be coming in with my own personal experience, and we'll just hopefully help you a little bit more in your running goals. Okay, so Toby, what's the first thing that you think is like a big mistake that people are making that just makes it so much harder than it needs to?
Yeah, the big mistake people make is we first turn towards these like materialistic things that I can buy, right? Yeah. So then we buy like all the like fancy shoes, we buy all the gear, all of that kind of stuff, and then we're still feeling like, wow, this is still really hard. I'm still hurting way more than I should after this.
Mhm.
That's because you got poor form, right?
Yeah.
Your technique. It's technique, and in running it's called your gait, the way that your legs operate, right? Proper running form can reduce the risk of injury. It can
Mhm.
make you more efficient, which means, well, you run easier, aka it sucks less.
Yeah, exactly. You're not expending so much energy while running. You can conserve it and use it towards the rest of the run. Um, I just remember, yeah, again, going back to the reel that I posted when I was running, I was so proud of myself because I'm running. And then Toby, he's like, what the are you doing?
I know.
Yeah, so my running gait, and Toby, can you tell them a little bit more about
Yeah,
what was wrong with mine?
absolutely. So what Casey was doing was she was striding out, basically meaning that her foot, when it hits the ground, was way out in front of her,
Hmm.
right? So what that makes you do on a treadmill, that's fine because all you have to do is pick up your feet, right? Like the ground moves for you, and if you just pick up your feet, you're going to be okay. But that's going to translate so poorly out when you're going to run on the road, because what happens now is when you strike out way in front of you, you're going to pull yourself forward, and that's now where a lot of hamstring injuries come from, especially as we're picking up the speed. I am now running mainly with one muscle group rather than kind of like spreading out that load a little bit.
Hmm.
And we feel a lot of tension in the hamstring. Right now, my foot is in a position where I might experience a lot of shin pain. Right? It's just by striding out way too far in front of you and leading with the toes,
Hmm.
we are being so inefficient and we're actually running the risk of suffering overuse injuries.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely running on the balls of my feet. That was what I was taught. Like that, that was what I was taught when I was younger. Is like run on the balls
Mhm.
of your feet. So I thought that applied to a running gait. Obviously, I was wrong. But can you tell us a few more basic principles of what people
100%.
should be
Yes.
looking for a really great running gait when they're
Yes.
running?
Right. So now the next mistake that a lot of people make is that we think about a very dramatic heel to toe strike. And
Hmm.
now there's a lot of shoes out there, and we will talk a little bit about footwear in a bit, that promote that style of rolling off, which that's also not proper,
Hmm.
right? So when we're looking at the foot strike, right, meaning how your foot hits the floor, we're trying to aim for a midfoot strike. I want to strike the right underneath me, rather midfoot, to distribute that impact that running has across the foot evenly.
Hmm.
That way, we're not experiencing some of those overuse injuries in the feet, right? If you've been running a lot, you may have heard some of the things like shin splints, plantar fasciitis, those kind of things,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
From there, posture matters, right? We do want to run tall. When I say tall, it's like it's the opposite. Some people just sit. And if you've ever seen somebody that runs like they look like they sit, you know exactly what I'm talking about,
Hmm.
right? But we do want to be tall from the hips up. We do want to have a slight forward lean when we're looking at between the ankle and the shoulder. So I want to lean slightly forward. And I've just over the past few weeks actually seen a lot of reels on Instagram where it's like person of you that POV, you realize you should be running with the forward lean. They
Hmm.
lean slightly forward and out of the sudden things just start falling into place,
Yep.
right? And the third thing to talk about when it comes to proper technique is probably your arms, right?
Hmm.
We want to make sure that where our arms move relatively straight back and forth and not left to right? We're not trying to give someone a hug, right?
Hmm.
Relaxed. One big thing that helps me is try to imagine you're holding like a very fragile potato chip in between your fingers, right? We shouldn't be super tense, right? Relax your hands, loose hands, moving your arms back and forward, not across the body side to side, because you're not running left to right. You're running in a straight line.
Exactly.
So you want to make sure that your arm swing helps with that momentum a little bit.
Yeah. I think another big thing that helps me is I'm very tense in the shoulders when I run. And the more tired I get, the more I shrug up. And then like things get really tight. So that's another thing is like the potato chips one, I think about that. But I also have to focus on trying to keep my shoulders down and relaxed. And that helps out a lot. But I'm always like, especially on longer runs, I always have to think about it. I always have to check myself and be like, my shoulders down. And because I can start feeling that tension
Listen,
build
that's
up.
the hardest part.
Yeah, dude, it is so hard. I
Relaxing.
mean, like I think majority of the time I'm not pushing super hard on my runs. I'm focusing on the basic principles. And a lot of it is technique because if you want to do this for a long period of time is if running is something that you want to do, you got to make sure that you're taking a step back and focusing on that technique. If I remember correctly, one of the most common forms of exercise that causes injuries is running. Now, that could potentially be because running is one of the most common forms of exercise, but
It's
I think
free.
it's what?
It's free.
It's free. Yeah, it's very accessible. It's free. It's very popular as well. But the other reason why is because I think a lot of people don't really consider the technique that goes into running. And so they just start running and then
Mhm.
you do that pattern over a period of time. And that could potentially lead to a lot of the aches and pains and injuries that a lot of people are experiencing. And the name of the game is how long can you stay in it? And staying healthy and having proper technique is a big part of it. So focusing on the technique is huge for making sure you're being very efficient. You're not getting the shrug shoulders and getting really tight and you're preventing injury. Okay, so what would you say is the second biggest like mistake that a lot of people are making that is making running a lot harder than it needs to?
Yeah. Probably as distance increases,
Mm-hmm.
this will become more and more important. Proper breathing while running.
Yes,
Um,
this was a big one for me.
um, right? You might fatigue faster than you want to when you don't breathe properly,
Mm-hmm.
right? It might speed you up or it might slow you down, right? You might get what's it called? And if I ever, for like future episodes or maybe this one, if I don't know a word, I sometimes ask Casey how to say certain things in English because originally I am not from America. So
Yep.
how do you call like side aches, side
Side
stitches,
stitch. Yeah, side
side
stitch. Yep.
side stitch? So if I'm breathing improperly, that's going to start happening. The second that happens, good luck relaxing,
Yeah.
right? I've actually seen people, and this is mainly whenever, so I don't run for leisure just because I'm too competitive of a nature. If I run for something,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm helping someone. So like I pace myself to someone else. And the last time I paced someone on a 5K was she started having a panic attack. It's
Yo.
because her breathing got so shallow, there was no oxygen coming in, right? And eventually, you do that long enough, you start panicking,
Mm.
right? That's usually where panic attacks happen. It's because I don't breathe properly, right? They're not very random. We learned that like last year, 2 years ago, I actually think at a convention that we can just by blood oxygen levels, we can predict if panic attacks are about to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the only thing that can add oxygen to your blood is your breathing.
Yep.
So breathe properly, right? I think the biggest thing, in case you can correct me if you've experienced differently, but the easiest way to think of breathing when I'm running is not breathe into my chest or my lungs, is try to feel me breathing into my belly.
I've heard that one. I will be 100% transparent and say that probably breathing is the hardest thing for me. It's really, really challenging. I've had to like really pull back on my pace simply just because I'm trying to get my breathing down. So I try to think about it. Am I good at it? Not yet. Like, to be 100% honest with you. So,
right? But as you're sitting, listening to this, just try to spot if you can actively breathe into your lungs or if you can actively breathe into your stomach. You'll feel your belly expand when you do it properly,
yeah.
right? But that is the fancy word is called diaphragmatic breathing, right? Like you're breathing through your diaphragm, which sits right over your belly, right? It's like we're breathing into it. Actually allows for more oxygen, for more air to come into your body,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
Deep breath.
currently practicing it right now. um, I've also heard some really great tips from a few other people that I've been like looking into, and some of it is trying to do more nasal breathing, whether it's just purely through nasal
Yes.
breathing. So it's just breathing through your nose rather than your mouth. And that also helps with like getting cotton mouth while you're running and all those different things. But also there's like a happy medium where you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. I am not good at that. I am not. I'm really practicing it. I'm determined to get it done. But breathing again, like that's my biggest weakness, I think, out
Mhm.
of all of them, if I have to
Yeah,
say. But it's such a really great thing to spend time and working on it.
absolutely.
Especially with a few other variables. It like leads into a few other variables that really does make running a lot
Mhm.
easier. But dude, it's my kryptonite, man. Gotta practice that. Okay, so what's the next thing? What's another mistake that is just making running suck for a lot of people when it doesn't have to?
So those are probably like the two most basic things, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can we can very easily, we don't need a lot of fancy gear. We don't need a lot of, I can practice on those things almost all the time, no matter the distance, no
Mm-hmm.
matter um the budget. Those are things that I have easily access to,
Yeah.
right? The next thing is probably if you want to invest in some gear, get a heart rate monitor
Mm.
or
Yes.
something that can. So I know a lot of people use a watch and the watches are great, but a heart rate monitor is far more accurate because there's less distance between the device and the heart in itself,
Yeah.
right? Considering your heart rate, if you can monitor your heart rate properly, it can help figure out what is too fast for you right now, what is too
Mm-hmm.
much effort, because you don't want to be overworking yourself, because running should be something that you can do. The human body is actually built for endurance. I know weight training and lifting and those kind of things, those are like, I always say that those are the sexy things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like running is usually considered cardio, right? And cardio is cardio, but the human body is meant, it's designed to run, to endure for a long time, right? So, and in order for you to get to that, we have to be able to figure out how much is too much and what is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to do that is to track your heart rate,
Yep.
right? Like we don't even have to dabble into training zones and those kind of things, right? But if your heart rate gets too high, that might not be the best for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if your heart rate is not high enough, you might not harvest as much from your training as you could.
Yep. I 100% agree. I think this kind of goes into the big tip that I had to learn is like when you're controlling your heart rate, you're also controlling how fast or like how hard you're pushing.
Hmm.
I thought when you went to run, you just pushed really, really hard, and you're like a very, very fast heart rate was just part of the deal. And then I think it was you. It was like you need to slow the fuck down. I was like, oh, like you need to go slow. And I
Yeah.
started learning more and more about it. And it's like ideally, you want to start like the hardest part of running is learning how to run slower and
Hmm.
learning how to train and maybe like a zone 2 or zone 3 area where it's like if you're doing like RPE where it's like perceived exertion, it would be on a scale of 1 to 10 it would be a 4 10 being the hardest.
Yes, like a 4 to a
Yeah.
6. That's probably where you will make the most progress.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I was like running, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to push that hard. It's okay to go slower.
Mhm.
As soon as I did that, everything started clicking a lot better, giving myself permission to go slower. For some reason in my brain, I was thinking faster is better. Maybe it's just like comparing myself to people that were much more experienced than me. I was like, maybe I should be going as fast as them. But that was the big game changer, is that I was actually supposed to be going slower. I was supposed to stay within that RPE of 4. And considering my heart rate now, I don't have a heart rate tracker on my chest just yet. I would like to get that in some time in my journey, but I use my Apple Watch, and
Yep.
I use that as a frame of reference because
Correct.
I can tell where I'm at 4, and I look at my heart rate. And if my heart rate is a little bit higher that day, I will just slow down my pace. That way I can get a good run in
Mhm.
rather than overexerting myself, either frying myself out, not having a good experience, or potentially having to stop mid run because I went too fast. So that's definitely a big thing, is like control your heart rate, keep it on the lower end, the RPE of 4 to what you said, 6.
Yeah.
As from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as you get more experienced, if you want to try to get faster with certain distances, you will spend time that are going to have like higher, like faster paces. Therefore, the RP is going to be higher. So you spend time a little bit on the faster pace, then back to the slower pace, and the faster pace, and the slower pace to train that a little bit more. But especially when you're starting, go slower than you think you need to. That was a big, huge game changer for me.
Yes, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? But it's like those are just some interval training. A lot of people think that most of interval training is just very, very fast, like high intensity interval training, right? Sprints, hard effort, but it can be as simple as, hey, jog. Like if you're just trying to get into this, jog for 2 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and then walk for 1 minute, right?
Yes.
Allow your heart rate to elevate just a little bit, allow it to come down just a little bit.
100%.
There's actually like a relatively famous strength and conditioning coach, Luca Hosevar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he works very closely with his athletes and monitoring their heart rate, and they will dictate their rest periods based on heart rate. So they have
Mm-hmm.
3 different heart rate zones, like a high zone. They're doing an exercise or an effort until their heart rate meets that high zone, and they're immediately done the second that happens.
Yeah.
And then they rest until their heart rate drops into the low zone again, right? So let's say you have a blue zone, a green zone, and a red zone. Watches and devices make that very, very easy to understand,
Mm-hmm. I know the
right?
Apple Watch does for sure.
Yeah. So when I'm doing something faster, I will just work until I get to that higher zone. And the
Mm-hmm.
second I just touch that, I come back down. And the second my heart rate dips back into that lower zone, I increase my effort again.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, you will recover very, very quickly. But the longer you go, you will have less work time because your fatigue increases, right? So you will work for less and then you will rest for more,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
It's actually very, very effective instead of just going by times like 1 minute fast, 30 seconds slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That 1 minute fast at a certain point may be unattainable and you
Yeah.
might be pushing it too much. So monitoring your heart rate through some of those things can be a game changer.
Yeah. 100%. And you were talking about intervals too. One of the
Mhm.
things that I started doing at the very beginning, before we even started having conversations, was I used it's an app called Couch to 5K, and they
Mhm.
use that principle where it's like, hey, your first week for 3 weeks, you're going to be doing this. And it was intervals. And that helped out a lot. I didn't feel like I had to run the whole time. It was really, really helpful. And it was super basic. Like as I kept progressing, we went a little bit more in depth in terms of the specific training that I was doing.
Mhm.
But that was a really great start to it. And it's very inexpensive. Really, really inexpensive. So, but let's move on to the next one. What do you
Oh,
say is the next
perfect.
big mistake?
Perfect segue. How from when you did the Couch to 5K app,
Mm-hmm.
how much did your the volume that you ran, right? Or like your exposure to that form of running. How much did that increase from one session to the next, from one week to the next?
Yeah, so with Couch to 5K, it wasn't necessarily like volume, like mileage.
Mhm.
It was more of time.
Correct.
And it was like, okay, you spend 30 minutes of work.
Hmm.
And then the first 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes was just straight up walking.
Hmm.
And then once you walked for 5 minutes, you went into an interval style training where it was like run for a minute, walk for 2 minutes, run for a minute, walk for 2 minutes. And then the next week it changed slightly. So it started slowly increasing over a period of time of the run to walking ratio. So I started running more and running longer distance and taking shorter breaks in between. But that made it super, super digestible, I guess I would say.
Yes.
It's like it was a lot more
100%, right?
attainable. Mm-hmm.
So it's taking the right progression approach.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest thing, or the fourth biggest mistake that people do, is they either increase too much or they start with way too much.
Yeah.
Just because you have a buddy who does ultra marathons, so for the people who don't know, that's 50 miles plus.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know someone who did a 100 miler.
Oh, Jesus.
There's crazier out there.
Yeah.
Um, and hey, what did you do? Well, I went on a casual 8 mile run. Oh, okay. So if you do that, I got to do that too. And then I go out and like I've never ran. I go out 4 miles in. And I'm like, oh my God, right? The
Yep.
biggest thing that people don't consider is when you don't have a loop that you've mapped out, whatever you run out, you have to come back,
Mm-hmm.
right? So don't chew off more than you can handle.
Oh, yeah.
Your
100%.
overall time of work or mileage should not increase by more than 10% from one week to the next.
100%.
Very gradual increments. You wouldn't do it any differently if you were to train with weights,
Yeah,
right? You wouldn't
exactly.
say, hey, my one rep max is 135. Next week, I'm going to do 225.
Yep.
You would never. You would try 140. You would try 145, right? You would PR little by little. Running
Exactly.
should be approached no different.
Exactly. 100%. Like that was one of my big mistakes when I first started. I was like, I want to do a 5K. So I just started trying to run a 5K.
Well, athlete's mindset.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like and again, like if you have been listening to us, you know how much we love strength training, and we have talked over and over and over again the
Mhm.
importance of progressive overload. The
Yes.
same principle applies to running. You have to progressively get better over a period of time. Otherwise, it is just not going to go well. It's kind of like, hey, I want a 200-pound back squat. So right now, I'm just going to start lifting 200, like trying to squat 200 pounds. And I'm going
Yeah.
to try to do it over and over and over again and expect me to get better. You might, but it more than likely will look like a shit show and it won't be
Yes.
enjoyable. It's the same thing with running. That was a hard lesson I had to learn. It's like, it's okay to start off small.
Hmm.
And with a 10% increase, okay, so let's use me for an example. Right now, I was kind of starting from like not doing any training because winter to now I'm building up to the 10K. And then in October, it's going to be a half marathon. So we're actually mapping out my weekly mileage. So that way it falls in line with the good rule of thumb of 10% increase. So for example, last week I did a total of 7.5 like a total mileage for the week.
Hmm.
So that's 2.5 miles if we're breaking up evenly through 3 sessions. Okay. So this week, I'm just breaking up nice and evenly this week as well. So a 10% increase is 2.5 miles to I'm just running 2.7 miles each day.
Hmm.
And that progression will keep increasing over a period of time. And your body should adapt to that very well without overshooting and still being able to recover.
Yes.
So gradual little increases. Don't be me and say, hey, I'm just going to run a half marathon over and over and over again. I'm just going to try to run as long as I can.
Hmm.
Could you do it? Yes. Could you potentially see progress? Maybe. Is it the best way? No, it's probably going to suck a lot.
Yes.
So progress overload is just going to make it so much more enjoyable in the long run. Okay, so next thing, what do you think is the next mistake that people make?
Shoes. Um,
Ooh.
Now we're getting the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Mistake number one is not buying the right shoes for you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even saying buying the right shoes, but knowing your own running style. What shoe should you wear? And what I mean by that is there's people that most bigger sporting goods stores, or maybe even a running only store,
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they will do a running gait analysis. So
Mm-hmm.
you will be on a treadmill for a couple of seconds and they will simply just film your feet from behind
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how does your foot strike the ground, right? Am I running more over my pinky toe? If that is the case, I need more support on that side of the shoe. Am I running more through the front of my foot? If that's the case, I need a shoe who's shaped properly so that it's a little bit more conducive to preventing that from happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, do I have the tendency to roll my foot to the inside? Do I have a high arch? Do I have a low arch?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different. That's why there is 3 walls in a running store worth of shoes.
Yep.
There's so many different feet, so there's so many different shoes to match those feet.
Yep.
Right? That's mistake number one. As we're talking about footwear. Mistake number two is not replacing your shoes often enough. If
Mm-hmm.
running is one of the things that you want to take up, you have to track your mileage, and you should probably, general rule of thumb, replace your shoes every 300 to 500 miles. It's just like over time, you'll replace the pillow that you sleep on, right? Because it lays flat.
Yep.
It's the same thing with your shoes. Over time, the cushion that you have in the shoe will just pound itself out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that a good pair of running shoes can cost a little bit of money, but spending that money and then not suffer from pain, injuries, is worth so much more, right? Like,
Yeah.
save yourself some money. Don't buy the most expensive running shirt. Don't buy like the name brand leggings and those kind of things. Save yourself that money and invest it into a pair of proper shoes,
Yeah,
right?
dude. Dude,
For
you can
like you're
find
running a potato sack.
Yeah, you can find some amazing running gear on Amazon for a
Yes,
fifth of the price. Like, if you're to
absolutely.
spend the money, spend it on the shoes. That's what's gonna
100%.
make it. Make it.
100%, right? It's one of the big things that we always talk about is
Mm-hmm.
an identity shift,
Yeah.
right? Like, you are not going running. If that is something that you want to take on, you need to act, train, recover, and think like a runner,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would a runner that is serious about that not switch their shoes when they should?
Yeah.
No. Only someone who goes running occasionally would do that,
Yeah.
right? But if you want to become a runner, this is one of the things you have to do. There's a reason why your best friend, or the one friend that you have that is adamant about running, has like 47 running pairs of shoes sitting in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying throw them out. Like, you can still wear them,
Yeah.
right? But they just shouldn't be your shoe that you now go out on the street with.
Yeah.
To
100%.
run. Like, wear them for the yard, to go bike riding, to like, if they're super comfortable, to go like do your target run, whatever. Just don't put way too many more miles running into them.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Like, I remember when I first started running. I think I was running in a pair of no-bull shoes for
Ouch.
runners, and you were like, "No,
Didn't I say
this."
something about that too? I was like, that's not a running shoe?
I think you were a lot nicer, and you were like, I wouldn't use those shoes. You could probably do better. You were much nicer, which was surprising. Usually he's pretty straight up front, like, dude, why? But
Humor me and go on their website right now. They're no
yeah,
longer called runners. Like, I don't
yeah,
I own 2 pairs. I just don't go running in them, but they're
yeah,
now called the everyday. Like, I think
yeah,
they're like renaming all of their shoes right now.
yeah. They're fantastic shoes. I still have them.
Yeah.
They look great. They're very comfortable. But
Comfortable.
as
Absolutely.
soon as I got a pair of actual running shoes, it was like I was like, oh my god, this is. I
I
feel
know.
like I'm on clouds. Like, this is so nice. Like, it made it 10 times easier to run. It was so much more enjoyable. So, like, full disclosure, I have not yet gone to a place to get my running gait looked at to get a specific shoe. I instead started with just some general recommendations for some really great shoes. I know Toby and Rachel are huge fans of, what was the shoe again? It was Ghost.
I have
Uh,
a, it depends,
yeah,
right? So now when if I name like a name of so a model of the brand that I have is Brooks.
yeah,
That's what I run in. That's what Rachel runs in.
yeah.
I
Everybody
didn't
has
really.
their own fan favorite of a brand.
It's because of their foot, right? I
Yeah.
have a very healthy foot. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a high arch. I have a pretty decent gait. So I have a very neutral shoe.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, on the other hand, has very high arches.
Yeah.
So she needs an entirely different shoe than I do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So I just went and I just got a pair of shoes, and it was much better than what I started with. But after my 10K, this is like my kind of reward. I've been doing little rewards
Hmm.
for myself. Like, every single time I do a week of training, I buy something out of Amazon, like a new like running apparel or something like I want to add to it
Every week. You're a
every
big
week.
boy.
But it's got to be under $25. That's a caveat. And if I want something more expensive, then I do it every 2 weeks.
Oh, I see. So
But
then
yeah,
you skip that and take the money that you would have spent and oh, I like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's a lot of fun, especially when you're trying to build a habit. Where a part of building a habit is the craving. Like, I want something, I
Mhm.
crave it. But a lot of times when you're starting with something, that craving isn't there. Just like when somebody's just starting out with eating healthy, they don't crave eating healthy foods. They crave the crap that they want to be eating. And so it's very hard to get started. So we're finding another craving or another reward to replace that
Mhm.
until you start developing that craving in itself can really help. Well, right now, I'm trying to get back into shape of running. That craving is not quite there yet. So we're building until it becomes a little bit more easier. I feel a little bit more in shape. And then from there, that's when I'm going to just run just for the pleasure of it. And so I've been doing those until after my 10K, bringing it around. I'm actually going to be like, as a reward, is to go into a running store and go get my Renegade looked at, get a pair of shoes specifically for that.
Full
Because
disclaimer, this should be free.
what?
I said full disclaimer, this should be free. This should
Oh,
be a
yeah.
service. This should be a service that they do.
Yeah, and so I'm so excited because I'm going to get a pair of shoes that's specifically for me to help me succeed. And I can already feel a little bit like what you're talking about before, where like just like a pillow, it's feeling
Mhm.
a little less cushiony. I can already feel that. So I think it's time for a change, not from this year's training. I was running previously before, so I did a lot of mileage on that. So we're going to be changing that up here in April. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. Okay, so next on the list, what do you think is the biggest mistake that people, or like another mistake that people make?
Probably nutrition, food.
Mm, yeah, that's a
Um,
big one.
it's just by being fueled properly, the level of effort that you put in can be either feel less or more. What
Mm-hmm,
I mean by that is if I'm running my 2.5 miles and I'm fueled properly, it can feel relatively easy.
mm-hmm.
But if I had a really, really crappy day, I'm exhausted just through not being fueled right, those 2.5 miles may feel like a world's kind of effort,
Yep,
right?
100%.
Um, Nutrition is what fuels you. So it will fuel your run, it will fuel your recovery, and those two combined, like let's say you train hard, you recover poorly, think how that's going to impact your overall performance and health in the long run,
Yep.
right? Again, you don't want to do this just for 2 weeks. You have set yourself a goal, right? You're running a half marathon soon. You need to be able to do this for a while,
Mm-hmm,
right? And I promise you, after that half marathon, you're not cool. Now what?
mm-hmm.
Full
Exactly.
marathon. Now what? Full either longer or full marathon faster,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like drinking that Kool-Aid. Um, but we need to make sure that we're fueling properly. And I don't mean this in a way of make sure that you only get organic foods,
No.
right? Adequate nutrition supports energy levels, recovery, those kind of things. And probably the two things that I want to touch on the most, two and a half, is carbohydrates. It's your primary energy source. I know a lot of people say that we run for fat loss, but when your heart rate goes up, your body is going to use a certain amount of fuel first, right? And that will be your carbohydrates, right? If you can't focus while you run, how are you going to focus on all of these things that we just talked about? Your brain's primary source of fuel is carbohydrates, right? Have some fruits before you run. Like my favorite pre-workout snack is to have a little, like a half bottle of Gatorade and a banana.
I usually do a banana, like about a half an hour to an hour before my run too. Yeah, that works really well.
Absolutely. Afterwards, protein. Running does break down muscle tissue because you are using muscle to propel yourself. So we got to repair them, right? So after you run, have some protein. It's essential for repair, recovery, right? And then as we're in the realm of nutrition, this is why I said it's a half for one, hydration.
Yeah.
You have to drink,
100%.
right? Cramps, especially as you're, when you're just getting into this, right? And you're cramping on a run, good luck coming back, right? Like if it gets super hot on you, dehydrated, you're going to get dizzy, right? Like you are sweating when you're running. So we have to make sure that your body has something to sweat out. And then when you're back, we have to make sure that you replenish yourself. Actually, something that we had to do in college, let it be football or track, we weighed in before we went outside and we weighed in after, and we had to drink water to make sure that we're replacing the weight that we had lost while running with water. Now, we had water and electrolytes, right? Like an electrolyte supplement, LMNT or whatever is your favorite. I just like the way it tastes.
Yeah, I love LMNT. So it's LMNT for those of you that are listening. It's a type of electrolyte that's absolutely phenomenal. It actually has enough like sodium in it too. I find that some electrolytes do not have enough sodium in it for you to properly replace or like properly get hydrated again, especially if you are running, because you're going to be sweating a lot more if you're running. So it's really, really informative. Do you mind if I add a few more things in there too that I found that's really helpful for me?
Go ahead. Are there things like iron, calcium, vitamins?
No, not necessarily. It's more basic than that. I think the other thing is to remember that when it comes to fat loss, running is not necessarily the most efficient thing.
Dude, way
Now,
too tiring.
it's very time consuming. So if you're like, hey, like this is the best way to lose fat, it's not. Can you do it still? Yes. If it's your form of exercise that you truly, thoroughly love, great, because you're being consistent, consistency over everything. But just know it's not necessarily the best way for fat loss. It actually makes you a lot hungrier, it increases your appetite a lot. Anybody that really gets into running will attest to this. Like you get super hungry, so it's very hard to stay in a calorie deficit. But I would say this, if you're running and you're not necessarily trying to do it for fat loss, make sure that you're eating in maintenance calories. Make sure that you're eating enough calories. And as your mileages go up, you more than likely might have to eat more.
Correct.
So I know as I'm getting closer to a half marathon, like right now, my mileage isn't a lot. Like we're building slowly. So I don't really have to eat much more. But when I get past the 10K, I know that I will be eating a lot more. I will be eating a lot more carbohydrates. I'll be making sure that I am like properly nourished for that, because if I don't, I clearly feel if I'm not eating enough and if I'm not eating enough carbohydrates. Like my runs feel really icky. I feel very slow. Mentally, I feel very fatigued. I'm not able to like have that really great mindset of I'm going to have a good run. I'm like, oh my God, like this is going to suck kind of a thing, which really does affect the whole process too. And my joints, my ligaments, my muscles, they just do not feel good. I do not recover very well. So if you're somebody that's running and you're just feeling really icky, you may not be eating enough calories and or enough carbohydrates to fuel your workouts. And as you progress, you may need to increase that. So just keep that in mind. And then in terms of hydration, yeah, like that's a big thing. Again, right now, my mileage is not super high, but as soon as I get maybe running a little bit more than like 40 minutes, I'm going to start running with water too. I'm
Or
going to
like a
start,
water belt.
yeah, like a water belt. I was thinking more of a vest that has a little thing that goes right here because I don't like having things jostle. I also don't like having things in my hands because if I do,
Yeah, neither do I.
I get like tense because I
Mhm.
have that in there. So I'm thinking about a vest. I saw one on Amazon for cheap. I'm not looking to spend a lot of money on it at all. I'd rather spend
Yeah,
my money on
I have
shoes.
a super lightweight like a backpack
Mm-hmm.
that straps in front of, like, it has like a chest strap to make sure
Yep.
that like it doesn't bounce as you run.
Yep.
That's the most annoying thing. I hate running with like wearing things,
Mm-hmm.
but I have one of those like a lightweight running backpack.
Yep. I plan on getting one of those, trying them out. I'll try a couple different ones and see if I like one or the other. I'll share that with you guys as I go too. But also, another thing is as you're running, another thing that you should keep in your like in a pocket or something like that as your mileages get up, like 40 minutes or more, is like a gel pack or chews
Huge.
to help
Absolutely.
with getting more carbohydrates. He was just talking about this. Carbohydrates is your best friend as a runner. It's what fuels your workouts. Even the carbs that you eat the day before dictates how you're going to feel the next day. So getting a good steady amount of carbohydrates overall is really great, but getting it during your workout to keep you going when you're getting your mileages up is really, really important. So there's gels, there's chews. I know there's a bunch of different brands and some work well with some people's stomachs than don't. I've been doing a lot of research on this. So I can't wait to dive in and try them all out. But that's also a big thing is if you're trying to do these long runs, but you're not bringing like some type of quick carbohydrate with you, that could be a game changer for you. Carbs are your best friend right there.
Yes. There are some chewing gums out there actually
Oh.
that are their makeup is hydrating.
Mm-hmm.
Like a run gum.
Mm-hmm.
Some are a little caffeinated so that you feel that alertness. Like it's not a lot by any
Yeah.
means, not a lot, just a little. Some are somewhat salty, some are somewhat sweet, depending on it is what you want to get out. But like if I go 10K or above, I actually have one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just go to the local sporting goods store. We have a
Yeah.
big Shields in town.
Yeah.
I just go there and they just have like a whole wall worth of stuff. 500 different flavors of things.
And those things, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm just learning, but correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of those things also have electrolytes in them too.
Yeah, most of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can also just get rehydrated through those electrolytes and then also get those carbs in. So those are like little tools that you can have in your toolbox, especially as you get about like 10K or above. Um, and from there, I do kind of want to wrap it up with something that I wanted to talk about that was a really big game changer for me when it comes to running. And a big part of making running suck less is literally what's going on in between your ears, your mindset.
Oh, so big.
So big. Like for those of you that know me, I'm not an expert in mindset, but I love mindset. I love geeking out about it. I always like talking about that kind of stuff. And some of the big things that I've experienced through my own journey that really were a huge game changer were like the first one is just like make sure that you're checking how you are speaking to yourself. There was many times, especially in my journey at the start, I was just like, I'm just not a runner. This is gonna suck. Oh my gosh. Like even when I was talking to people and I was like, yeah, I'm about to go on the run, they're like, oh great, go have fun. I'm like, no, it's gonna suck, man. Like even those little things, like that can like your perception on things can make or break like what you the meanings and beliefs that you put on there are literally your reality. So if you think it's going to suck, it is going to suck. If you think that you're never going to be the runner, you are never going to be a runner, right? You literally make your own reality. So pay attention to how you speak to yourself. Are you saying, hey, this is going to suck, or like, hey, this is going to be challenging but I'm going to have a good run, right? Or hey, like I'm putting myself out of oh my gosh, I'm so scared about this, or like no, I like this challenge. It's going to challenge me. I'm going to get better today. Like how are you speaking to yourself on that? That's a really big one. The first thing to creating any change is simply by creating awareness. So take a step back and think to yourself, where could this potentially be presenting? Am I actually speaking to myself in more of a positive, more of a what's called a growth mindset, where like I'm ready for challenges, I am capable of creating change, I'm looking forward to this, things like that. Okay. The next thing I would say is that you've got to be okay with sucking at something. You got to be okay with sucking at something, because if you're going to get good at anything, you have to be willing to start it as a student. I think everybody is trying to be an expert in everything. And if they aren't an expert in it, they feel less valued. And it's like everybody has to start as a student. So you got to be willing to put yourself in a position where you're willing to learn, you're willing to ask questions, you're okay with not being great at something. Like Toby, me and you, we work together, we coach other people. If I was not willing to be a student and be like, Toby, I'm not good at this, I don't know how to do this kind of stuff. If I didn't put my ego in my back pocket, I would have never had the opportunity to learn these really great things. And hopefully over a period of time, I will be less of a novice and I'll start learning more and more, and I'll be like moving towards being a little bit more of an expert in that area. But that will never happen unless I'm willing to suck at it first. So be okay with that. Give yourself permission to not be good at something, and make it fun. Like nobody likes to be with that person where it's like, hey, I'm just starting out, but I suck. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Versus the person's like, yeah, I'm new, I'm here to learn something new, how can I get better? Everybody enjoys a person that is the latter. So be that person as well, because it's going to be more enjoyable. Which is a really great way to segue to the next thing that I think is a big hindrance on a lot of people's progress is comparison. They're always comparing themselves to other people, whether they see them on social media or their friend that's running with them. Like they're doing their first 5K with their friend, and they're like, oh my gosh, my friend is so much faster than me, I shouldn't be doing this, I suck, all these different things. I'm like, dude, you're doing a 5K. That's okay. Like you're doing something different. You're challenging yourself. You're getting better. Don't compare yourself to somebody that's on a chapter 50 when you're on a chapter 1. Stay in your lane and focus on you, and just focus on getting little by little, day by day, getting a little bit better. Otherwise, you're literally going to take away your joy, and it's not going to be enjoyable. And we can all agree that if you're not enjoying it because you're comparing yourself to other people, you're not going to last long. Right? So if somebody has a different pace than you, if they ran a 5K faster than you, that's okay. That's okay. And then lastly, obviously, a lot of these things are like the first couple ones are very, very easy to do. But when it comes to like the heart rate monitor, the shoes, and all those different things, don't get wrapped up in those and be like, oh, I can't start running until I have the perfect shoes. I can't start running. Say that again.
That's why we didn't mention it as the first thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't do this because I don't have the perfect running program, or I don't know how to get started, or I don't have the perfect technique, or don't do that to yourself. Take imperfect action.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started running, I just started running. And as I went through my journey, I started learning little things like, hey, my technique wasn't really great, or hey, like I could get better shoes. I just admitted to you guys that I haven't gone in to get my running gait checked to find really great shoes. I just got shoes because I wanted to take imperfect action. So don't let perfectionism or your perfectionist mindset get in the way of progress. Just get started.
99% of you didn't go to culinary school, yet you cook food at home every single day, right? Like, do you cook as well as a chef in a Michelin star restaurant? No, you don't. Do you need a recipe for every single thing you cook? No. Does it taste better if you have someone telling you what to put in? Maybe. But over time, right, you start out making ramen, making spaghetti, cooking steak, right? And then like over time, you get fancier as you go. It's no different here. It's a new thing that you're trying to learn. And how do you know what you don't know unless you give yourself to the opportunity of figuring out what you don't know?
No, exactly. I call it with my clients, and excuse my language, guys, I'm a daughter of a construction worker, but It's called fucking around and finding out. We're
Yeah.
just having fun. We're just trying things. Like, how many times do you go in the kitchen? You're just like, I'm just going to fuck around and find out. Does this go together? No, that's okay. I'm going to move on and try to figure
That
something
tastes
else.
terrible.
Right? So, um, just take action, right? Thinking about the thing is not doing the thing. Worrying about the thing is not doing the thing. Planning the thing is not doing the thing. Doing the thing is doing the thing. You will figure things out as you go. Stop thinking about it. Stop planning it and just do it. You will get it. I promise. Okay.
Right.
Besides that, I mean, those are the basics to get started with. I think those are the big rocks. From there, it's kind of medium rocks and smaller rocks that you could focus on, but just get these things down. If you can get these things down, the whole process is going to be so much more enjoyable and you're going to have a lot more fun with it.
Full disclaimer.
Yeah.
If you hate running, don't go.
Yeah, like if you hate running, don't run.
Like if you, like this is neither me nor Casey telling you it's like you should run, you should lift. It's like do the thing that you enjoy. But if you've always been that person that says, you know what, I would like to get into this, but you know, I actually, when I go, I actually really enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
But this is us telling you you can go.
Yeah.
Go, you just have to strip it down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you're like, it's like, I tried this sucks. It's like, did it suck because you did too much? Because you hurt after?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if that's the thing that keeps you from it, try again, give it a shot, and just strip it down to the basics. But if you're like, I tried this, I didn't hurt, I just thoroughly did not enjoy, don't go.
No, exactly. Yeah, do what you enjoy, but like just like you said before, and it was very similar to me. Is like I've always wanted to be a well-rounded athlete. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to be that person that if I wanted to go on the run, I could go on the run. If I could do pull-ups, I could do pull-ups. If I wanted to lift heavy weights, I wanted to lift heavy weights. I wanted to be a very capable person. But I never got into long distance running just because it always just sucked every single time I did it. It was a big reason why I never tried out for track in middle school and high schools. I wanted to, but every single time I tried to do it, I sucked at it. And my mindset got in the way of like, I could never be this person. So if you relate to that, then give this a try. Try to do it the right way, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
And then make an educated decision from there. If you like it or not. If you hate it, you don't have to do it. You don't have to run. Like the leanest I ever got, if your goal is fat loss, because a lot of people are, the leanest I ever got was without running, right? Like there's so many different other forms of cardio that you can do to improve your cardiovascular health, if that's a goal as well. But if you are a runner, I definitely believe that if you really get good at these big rocks and not get distracted by other things, this is going to become really enjoyable for you. It's going to suck a lot less and you're going to last a lot longer in your journey of becoming a runner.
Yes. So. And if you're thinking about, oh, I will run soon, once I'm done prioritizing muscle mass, running actually doesn't lower your muscle mass. Running and not eating enough will. So you're not going to lose the valuable muscle mass that you've worked towards. Mm-hmm. I actually really enjoy this new trend of like people that we see that call themselves hybrid athletes, mm-hmm. right? There's lots of people that look like they could be bodybuilders, but they're very, very competitive runners, like qualifying for Boston marathons, mm-hmm. type runners. There's people that are very, very accomplished power lifters, meaning they're very strong, but they also go run a lot, right? It's like you can do both. We just have to make sure that we're playing the game right. You need to do those the more you want to do, the longer it's going to take, mm-hmm. and the more attention you have to pay to the little things.
Yep.
Right? But neither one thing has to exclude the other. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like I actually really enjoy doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Right? I just have to be okay with, hey, is my physique going to change at the pace as if I were to only do physique-based training. It'll take longer. Am I going to improve in running as much as I would if I were to only run? It's going to take a little longer, but that's okay, right? It's because I'm here to stay, right? I want to be the person that does all of these things when I'm 75.
Yeah.
So
it's not a short-term thing that you're doing. It's literally your identity. It's a long-term, lifelong endeavor. So
absolutely.
You got the time.
Right.
I love that you brought that up. But that's about it, guys. Thank you for joining us for another podcast episode. Tobi, as always, thank you for joining me and talking about this topic. I hope you guys got a thing or two to help you with your running journey. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to ask us, reach out. In the show notes, we've got our contact information. We love questions.
What about giving suggestions on what people want to hear? Like if you want to hear us talk about some things.
Yeah. I love that too. Yeah. Our doors are open. Like we don't bite. So go ahead and reach out. If you got questions, let us know. If you have requests on what we should be talking about on this podcast, please let us know too. If you feel like this was super, super helpful and you feel like other people could benefit from this video or from this podcast too, feel free to share that with your friends. If you're listening to this on YouTube, share the link as well. Make sure that we're sharing the good word, because our mission right here at Thriving On is to make everybody the CEO of their own damn health by providing the really good information out there. All right. As always, we appreciate your time and attention. You guys have a great day and happy running.
Ooh, I like that. Happy running.
Yeah.